heck? How can positivity be problematic? The line gets crossed when your positivity and optimism becomes automatic. Avoidance dressed in growth mindset is still avoidance. It's just wearing a costume. You become someone who is very good at being okay with things that you probably shouldn't be okay with. More specifically, it becomes self-abandonment. Hi, welcome back, or if you're new here, hello, welcome. I'm so glad that you found me. If we haven't been introduced before, my name is Adriana. I am a subconscious reprogramming specialist, and I help people identify and change the hidden patterns that influence their confidence, their decisions, and their behavior. And I want to start off today's episode by asking you something. Growing up, or maybe just even in your adult life or in the personal development spaces you've been in, what were you taught to do when something felt hard? When something didn't go the way that you wanted, when a relationship disappointed you, when a situation felt off, what were you guided to do? What was the messaging around something like this? Because I would be willing to bet that the answer was some version of, there's a lesson in everything. Just find the lesson, reframe it, look for the silver lining. It's a growth opportunity. Choose positivity. And that messaging is everywhere. It's in the self-help books, it's in the Instagram captions, it's in the way that we talk to each other when, someone is struggling. But look at the good in it. But what about what you learned? But at least, right? These are some of the things that we hear people telling us, we hear kind of preach, and we find ourselves doing also with other people and even with ourselves. And I'm not here to tell you that that's wrong, because that's not even what I believe. I don't believe that that's wrong. There's something very real in that. But I do want to talk to you about what happens when that becomes your default, when that becomes your automatic, when the thing your brain does before you even had a chance to feel anything is reframe it, is to find the lesson in it. Because there is a version of this that stops being positivity and it stops being growth, and it actually starts being something entirely different. So I want to get into the nuance of all of this. So positivity inherently is not bad. It's great. It's good. It's the optimism, the hope, the being able to find the good in things. That is such a beautiful skill to have. And I know that if you're in the personal development world, maybe you weren't always trained to think that way. Maybe this is a new way of thinking and you're kind of proud that you've gotten yourself here, right? And I don't want to diminish that. I want to celebrate that. That's all good and great and dandy. The positivity isn't the problem. Perspective isn't the problem. The ability to not be swallowed by something hard, that's such a good skill to have, and that's a skill that you want to have. But it can start to cross the line, and it can start to tip the scale. And if you're like, what the heck? How can positivity be problematic? Go listen to last week's episode. We dove so deep in on when optimism can actually start to become a problem. So if positivity can be problematic, the question then becomes, when does it cross the line? And if you did listen to last week's episode, maybe you were left questioning that of like, okay, well, how the heck am I supposed to know what's good positivity and what starts to go into bypass or avoidance? And the line gets crossed when your positivity and optimism becomes automatic. When it happens before the feeling has had a chance to land, when it's not a conscious choice anymore to find the good in things, but it's an unconscious reflex to not have to feel the bad. And here's the thing about that version is that it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like coping. It feels like maturity. It feels like, I've done so much work on myself. I finally don't have to spiral anymore. And that's exactly what makes it so hard to catch, because avoidance dressed in growth mindset is still avoidance. It's just wearing a costume. And what it's avoiding is the signal, the flicker of, this doesn't feel right. This isn't working. Something here needs my attention. And that signal exists for a reason. It's your inner world trying to tell you something. And when the silver lining thinking, when that toxic positivity, when that like conditioned optimism intercepts that signal before it can finish arriving, then you don't get the message. You don't get the signal your inner world was trying to communicate with you. And the thing that needed your attention doesn't get it over and over and over again until the signal that your inner world is sending stops feeling urgent, until you stop noticing them, until you become someone who is very good at being okay with things that you probably shouldn't be okay with. That is when positivity becomes the problem. And more specifically, that is when it becomes self-abandonment. And I keep coming back to that word self-abandonment, and I know that that word can feel really heavy. It can feel really dramatic. It can feel like it belongs to like a more obvious kind of story, someone who has completely lost themselves, who gave up everything for everyone and had nothing left. And maybe that's not your story. Maybe your life looks completely fine and intact, and you show up and you function and you're totally fine. But what I want to offer you is a different definition of self-abandonment, because I think the version that most of us actually live in is a lot quieter than like what you see on like, I don't know, the rom-coms and in memoirs and stuff. It's not one big like lose yourself moment. It's the slow erosion of your ability to know yourself, to hear yourself, to truly trust what's actually true for you underneath all of the ways that you learn to just like be okay. And that erosion, that small dissolve of losing yourself, of disconnecting with yourself, that is what we're going to be talking about today. So I want to be really specific about what self-abandonment looks like from the inside, because self-abandonment sounds like a really big word. It sounds like it belongs to, like I said, a particular type of story. And if your life genuinely looks okay on the outside, if you're functioning, you're showing up, you're fine, then you won't think that that word belongs to you. And if you don't think that the word belongs to you, then you might miss the solution to what you're experiencing. So I just want you to be a little open-minded. I know that that word sounds a little scary. Just be a little open-minded. See if this fits. If not, that's okay. It doesn't have to resonate with you. But here is what I see when I'm sitting with women in my practice, is that they're not someone who completely lost themselves. Usually the woman that's sitting in front of me is someone who has become very, very, very good at being okay with things, at adjusting, at finding the version of the situation that she can live with. She's agreeable, not in a doormat way, but in a way that reads as really easygoing and emotionally mature and just low drama. And she's kind of proud of that because she worked hard to get to this point, right? She worked hard to find the optimism, to find the hope, to let things go and find the silver lining, right? But if you spend time with her enough, you start to notice something. If you ask her what she actually wants, she hesitates, not because she's indecisive, she can make decisions fine, but because she genuinely isn't sure anymore what a real version of her is, what a real want is versus what she talked herself into wanting. Ask her how she really feels about something and she'll give you the generous version, the fair version, the version that takes someone else's perspective into account, and she thinks that she's being considerate. Right? She thinks that she's just considering their opinion, so she's trying to assess what they want and give her opinion from there. And it's not that she's lying. It's not that she has something to hide. It's that the other version, the raw version, the true, less edited version, she just doesn't have access to that anymore. That's the self-abandonment that I'm talking about. It's not a dramatic loss. It's a slow drift away from your own knowing. And where I see this show up the most clearly is in relationships, because the silver lining pattern doesn't just run internally, it runs with people. And in relationships, it has a very specific texture. Usually, you know, the women that I'm sitting with in sessions, she's the one who's so easy to be around. She doesn't make things complicated. She can find the good in people even when they're not showing up well for her. And she, you know, loves everyone. She cares about everyone. She's so considerate, and everyone loves that about her. And so she loves that about herself because she feels like she's always giving and she's considerate to people. And she gets told she's so understanding and she's so mature. She's such a good friend. She's such a good partner. And she is, genuinely. We're not denying that she's genuinely a good partner, but there's usually something else that's happening underneath that nobody sees, including her, is that she's smiling through things that hurt. She's filing away moments that didn't feel right. She's having the real conversation in her head on the drive home instead of in the room where it needs to be had. And every time one of those moments comes up, every time something lands wrong, or every time she feels that something is a little off, the silver lining is right there. The positivity is right there. Things like, he didn't mean that, or he's just having a hard day, or you know what, she's going through a lot right now. It's not worth making this a whole thing. And like on the surface, that sounds okay, right? But it's when it becomes an avoidance tactic to avoid feeling something, to avoid taking a specific behavior that she's fearful of taking. The moment passes, she moves on, and nothing changes. And what that costs her relationally is not just that she's not advocating for herself, it's that nobody actually gets to know her because the version of her that shows up in relationships has already been edited. The part that might be inconvenient, the needs that might be too much, the feelings that don't get the silver lining treatment fast enough, those don't make it into the room. Those don't make it into the conversations with people. And so the connection she has with people, even people she loves, even people who love her, it's real, but it's just not complete. And she feels that, and she can't really understand why, because she's showing up for people, right? But she can't understand why something feels off. She can't put her finger on it. She wonders why she feels so lonely even when she's surrounded by people who care about her. She wonders why she can't fully relax in her relationships even when, the people around her have given her no reason to. She wonders why there's some part of her that's turned on in relationships and she can't fully settle into them. And the answer isn't that she needs better people, it's that the people she is around have never fully met her because she keeps arriving pre-edited. And what I want to name for what's actually happening underneath all of this, the relationships that feel incomplete, the wants that she can't quite locate, the feelings that are always the generous version of the feelings, is this. She has lost her discernment. And I want to explain what I mean by that because I don't think discernment gets talked about in enough context, but I'm always sharing it and bringing this up with my clients. Discernment isn't just the ability to make good decisions, it's the ability to know what's actually true to you and for you. To feel into a situation and get a clean read on it, to trust the signal your inner world is sending before your mind has a chance to edit it with the silver lining thinking, with the optimism, with the growth, with the positivity. Discernment is how you know yourself. And when you have spent years, and for a lot of women I work with, it has been years, intercepting every uncomfortable signal with a reframe, every flicker of this doesn't feel right with a, but look at it this way, every moment of, I don't think I want this with, I'm probably just being too sensitive, your discernment quietly erodes. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens so gradually that you don't even realize it. It's in the way like you don't notice a room getting darker until you realize you can't really see anymore. It's that kind of slow, gradual burn. And what that erosion looks like in practice is that she can't tell the difference between a real red flag and her anxiety talking. She can't tell whether she actually wants the thing or whether she's just convincing herself that she wants the thing. She can't tell if a relationship is genuinely good or if she's just very good at finding the reasons that it is good. She can't tell if the discomfort she's feeling is a signal worth listening to or if it's just resistance to sit through. Everything kind of gets flattened because the filter has been running for so long that she doesn't even know what her unfiltered read on anything actually is anymore. And that loss of access to her inner knowing is the self-abandonment. It's not the positivity itself. It's the positivity is just the mechanism. The self-abandonment is what's left when it's been running long enough. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still have abandoned yourself. You can have a life that looks good on paper and still have abandoned yourself. You can be someone who has done enormous amounts of self-help and personal development work and still have abandoned yourself, because self-abandonment isn't about what your life looks like from the outside. It's about whether you're still in relationship with your inner world and whether that channel between you and your inner world is still open and whether you can still hear yourself. And if that silver lining thinking pattern, if that overly positivity, if that conditioned optimism is still running and it's been running long enough, the honest answer for a lot of women is no. That channel isn't open anymore. They can't feel their inner world anymore. They don't have access to that anymore. And I know that that's really hard to sit with if you're starting to recognize yourself in some of these things. I know these things are heavy. I know that, it's vulnerable to look at these things. I totally understand that. So I want to say something before we go any further. I think it's really important. This pattern doesn't come out of nowhere. It is not a personality flaw. It formed at some point, probably so long ago. And when it formed, it was useful. Maybe even it was necessary. Maybe you grew up in an environment where things were unpredictable, and finding the silver lining is how you stayed okay. Maybe you learned early that having needs or expressing disappointment made things harder, made people uncomfortable, made you too much. And so you found a way to, curate yourself in order to not have needs, right? And so now you use the silver lining, you use the positivity to silence your needs so that way you can continue to feel like you're okay and you're accepted. Maybe you spent years in anxiety and the reframe is genuinely what kept you from spiraling. All of those things worked. And so we don't shame ourselves for this pattern if we have it, because it was learned in a certain period of your life where it was needed and it was necessary and it worked. It did the job it was built to do. The problem is not that it formed. The problem is that it never got the memo that things have changed and that you're not in that environment anymore, and that you're allowed to feel the things, and that the signal is safe to receive now, and that it's just still running that old programming. It's still intercepting, it's still reframing, it's still keeping you from having to feel what it decided a long time ago was too threatening to actually feel. So the pattern is not the problem. The problem is that the source hasn't been updated to your current reality. And so it's misfiring in your present day, or it's firing in moments where you don't want to, or it's just created so much of a disconnection with yourself that you haven't been able to find your way back home. And so we don't shame ourselves. We just notice it within ourselves. And if this feels like it is resonating with you, if this is landing with you, see if you can bring some compassion to it, because this pattern is not weakness. It's not failure. It's not even a you problem. It's a subconscious problem. It's a very, very loyal subconscious protection mechanism that has outlived its original purpose. And the goal isn't to get rid of it. The goal is to update it. The goal here is not to become someone who catastrophizes everything. The goal isn't to be a negative person. The goal isn't to be someone who doesn't find the good in anything. That's not the opposite of what we're talking about. The goal here is discernment, the ability to let a signal land before you decided what to do with it, to be able to sit with something that feels uncomfortable, that feels challenging, and sit with it long enough to hear what it's actually trying to tell you before that positive reframe kicks in. To be in enough relationship with yourself that you know the difference between a genuine perspective and a very well practiced way of not having to look at something. And if you're starting to notice that you have this pattern, I want to be really specific about something, is that the silver lining thinking is probably the reason that you have stayed in things way past their expiration date, why you have stayed in things, why you have kept yourself in things well past their time. The job that hasn't been right for 2 years, the friendship that keeps taking more than it gives, the relationship dynamic that you keep finding reasons to stay in. It's not that you don't know. You do know, you have known, but every time you get close to the knowing, every time you feel that flicker of, I think it might be time, that positive reframe kicks in. But there's so much good here, but the timing isn't right. But maybe I just haven't given it all. Maybe there's something good that's going to come out of this, right? And so that silver lining pattern is the reason you stay. It's not because you haven't made a clear decision or you can't make a clear decision. It's because the silver lining has made it easy enough to not leave. And usually the women that I work with in my one-on-one spaces or within my programs is they know that they're doing this and they want to stop. They want to stop doing this to themselves. And this is what I hear over and over and over again, are things like, I want to be able to trust myself. I want to be able to leave when I know that it's time to leave. I don't want to have to talk myself out of it. I want to stop saying yes to things that I actually don't want to get involved in. And I want you to understand that the reason that that's happening is not because you can't decide to stop or you can't decide to leave. The reason knowing about this pattern doesn't automatically change it is that the silver lining thinking isn't the root. It's the mechanism protecting the root. What's underneath that, what the root is, there are fears, real ones, fears that have probably been in there in your subconscious for so long, fears of what it means if you do walk away, fear of disappointing someone, fear of disrupting something even when it's not working, fear of what's on the other side of saying what's actually true for you, fear of speaking your voice, fear of being seen, fear of allowing yourself to have good things. Those are the fears that are keeping you stuck. The silver lining is just how they're staying hidden. And so if you want to overcome the silver lining pattern, if you're starting to notice that it is causing problematic dynamics in your life, awareness of the pattern matters. It's so important. Awareness is always the first step, but it is still just the beginning. This is a subconscious pattern, and you can't think your way out of a subconscious pattern. And that's what these fears are: programs, subconscious programming, wired in, running underneath, below the surface of where decisions are actually getting made. And that's where the real work is at addressing this pattern. That's what we do inside of the anxiety shift. We don't just name the pattern, but we go underneath it. We address those specific fears that are causing the silver lining to run. We address the fears that are keeping you in things past their time. We address the fears that are keeping you saying yes when you want to say no. We address the fears that keep you arriving as this edited version of yourself in all of your relationships and all of your dynamics. And we actually work on them on the subconscious root, because that's the only place that the silver lining pattern will actually dissolve. So I will link that program in the show notes for you if you are interested and if you want to learn more about that work. But that's all I have for you today. I hope that this helped you feel seen. I hope it helped you identify maybe a pattern that you haven't been able to name before. So I would love to know your thoughts, and I will see you in the next episode.